August 13th, 2025. The Crane family spent decades in their Merritt Island home until a crane, meant to install an ordinary utility pole, collapsed without warning and crushed everything they owned. The headline, "Crane versus Crane: When Your Last Name Becomes Your Nightmare," shocked the nation. Yet beneath the viral irony lies a pattern of reckless decisions, ignored warnings, and a deadly year for crane disasters across the United States. How could a single oversight destroy a family and expose an industry in crisis? Jim Crane stood at the edge of his driveway, arms crossed, watching a crew from Big Iron International maneuver the Liebherr crane into position. The morning was already humid, the kind of Florida heat that makes everything feel heavier. He had lived on Mackerel Drive for over 40 years, long enough to know the ground here could be unpredictable, especially after summer rains. As the workers prepared to deploy the crane's massive outriggers, Jim's concern grew. He stepped forward, voice steady but urgent. "I think this is a very bad idea," he told the operator, glancing at the spot where the outrigger would press down, just feet from his front walk. Doorbell camera footage later time-stamped the moment at just after 10:20 a.m. The crew barely looked up. One worker, in a high-visibility vest streaked with dust, shrugged off the warning. He assured Jim they'd done hundreds of jobs just like this, that the equipment and ground were more than up to the task. No one paused to check for utility markings or to ask if the ground had been surveyed. There was no sign of the orange spray paint that usually signals buried lines. No flags. No evidence that Florida's mandatory 811 call before you dig system had been followed. The outrigger pad settled directly over a patch of grass that Jim knew sat above an old, unmarked water main, something he'd mentioned. Twice, as the crew set up, neighbors watched from behind their windows, some filming with their phones as the crane's boom began to rise. Jim lingered outside, uneasy. "I just kept thinking, this isn't right," he later told a local reporter. But they wouldn't listen. The confidence of the crew stood in sharp contrast to the anxiety on Jim's face, captured in passing by a neighbor's camera as he paced the sidewalk. In that moment, the difference between professional assurance and lived experience was measured in a few feet of ground and a single ignored warning. The tension built quietly, the outcome still hidden beneath the surface as the crane's engine rumbled and the day pressed on. A helicopter circled above Mackerel Drive as sirens echoed in the distance. The white and blue boom of the Liebherr crane pierced straight through the roof of the Crane family home, splitting the structure from the kitchen to the back porch. Debris fanned out across the yard. Furniture and beams tangled under the weight of tens of thousands of pounds of steel. From above, the devastation was unmistakable. A single machine had erased decades of family history in seconds. Neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, some still clutching their phones, stunned by the violence of what they had just witnessed. One described hearing a thunderous crash that rattled windows up and down the block. Another, voice shaking, told a reporter, "It sounded like the world was ending." Amanda Crane's car was missing from the driveway. She had left early that morning to take their rescue dog to the veterinarian. That small change in routine meant she was miles away when the collapse struck. Later, she would tell Fox 35, "She saved my life, and I saved her. These are just things, but I'm grateful we're alive." Jim stood outside, untouched but shaken, watching as water from the broken main continued to flood the property. The sound of rushing water mixed with the beeping of emergency vehicles as first responders arrived. Firefighters and police moved quickly to secure the area, checking for gas leaks and searching the ruins to confirm no one was trapped inside. The living room, the kitchen, and the back bedrooms were all reduced to splintered wood and twisted metal. In the hours that followed, news crews from Fox 35, Orlando, and WESH set up along the curb, broadcasting live shots of the wreckage. The story spread quickly. Total property loss, no injuries, and the bitter irony of a family named Crane losing everything to a crane. For Jim and Amanda, survival was a matter of luck and timing. For their neighbors, the sight of the crushed home served as a reminder that disaster can arrive without warning, even in the most familiar place. Big Iron International's crew arrived on Mackerel Drive with a clear mandate: install a new utility pole for AT&T. The job should have started with paperwork. Florida law requires contractors to call 811 at least 2 business days before any ground disturbance. This step triggers utility companies to mark buried lines and pipes, a safeguard meant to prevent exactly the kind of disaster that would unfold. But no such notification was made. There were no utility flags, no records of a completed 811 call, and no evidence of ground-penetrating radar having been used to scan for subsurface hazards. Florida's Underground Facility Damage Prevention and Safety Act leaves little room for interpretation. The statute covers any operation that disturbs the ground, including the temporary placement of crane outriggers. A 2024 legislative update made it explicit. Failing to notify 811 and verify markings before deploying heavy equipment is not just unsafe. It's a direct violation, now carrying fines of up to $2,500 per incident and up to $10,000 for repeated or willful breaches. The official Florida 811 Handbook for Excavators, revised in 2025, reminds contractors that outriggers, even if temporary, can exert ground pressure sufficient to breach utilities and are treated as excavation under current law. Despite these requirements, the crew from Big Iron International acted on routine, not regulation. There was no written confirmation of utility clearance, no documentation of pre-job safety checks, and no permit on file for ground disturbance. The absence of these records would later draw sharp attention from investigators, but on the morning of August 13th, the crew pressed forward. AT&T, as the contracting entity, had delegated the work, but did not require a pre-lift safety audit or verification of utility marking as part of their subcontractor oversight. This gap in the contract chain allowed the crew to bypass essential safeguards without challenge or delay. The decision to skip procedural steps set off a chain reaction that could not be reversed. With no utility markings and no ground surface, the outrigger was sited directly above an unmarked water main. The crew's reliance on experience, rather than compliance, left them blind to the danger beneath their equipment. The paperwork that should have protected the crane's home and the crew itself never existed. The legal and procedural safeguards were not just overlooked, they were absent from the start, leaving the site exposed to the hidden risks below. A crane's stability depends on the invisible partnership between steel and soil. Outriggers, those heavy legs that spread from the crane's base, are designed to transfer tens of thousands of pounds onto the ground below. On a typical lift, each outrigger pad on a large Liebherr all-terrain crane can press down with as much as 80 tons, more than the weight of a diesel locomotive, focused onto a patch of earth not much bigger than a kitchen table. That force only holds if the soil beneath remains solid and dry. When a pressurized water main ruptures, the physics change in an instant. Water surges out, carrying fine sand and soil particles away at high speed. This process, called internal erosion or soil piping, undermines the ground's structure from below, hollowing out support that once seemed firm. Florida's sandy soils, already loose and saturated from summer rains, are especially vulnerable. A 6-inch water main at city pressure, often 80 pounds per square inch or more, can release over 1,000 gallons a minute, enough to wash out the supporting earth in less than 5 minutes. Civil engineering studies confirm that soil-bearing strength can drop by 90% in moments, turning what was once solid ground into something that acts more like quicksand. As the water jets upward, the outrigger pad loses its footing. The load that was safely distributed across 4 points suddenly shifts, concentrating weight on the remaining supports. But with one corner gone soft, the crane's center of gravity moves outside its safe zone. The entire machine becomes a teeter-totter with nothing to balance against. The physics are unforgiving. Even a slight tilt is enough to send the boom arcing downward. In documented cases, collapse can follow less than 90 seconds after the first signs of washout. OSHA diagrams and news footage from Merritt Island show the sequence clearly. The soil vanishes beneath the outrigger. The crane's base tilts, and the boom pivots inexorably toward the house. There is no time to react or redistribute the load. The collapse is not a slow-motion failure, but a sudden, catastrophic loss of support. A chain reaction set off by water, gravity, and the absence of a simple precaution. In the end, the forces at work are invisible until the moment they become undeniable, leaving behind a trail of destruction that could have been prevented by understanding what lay below the surface. On June 3, 2025, the construction site at Cape Canaveral Hospital was bustling with activity as crews worked to expand the facility. The project, valued at $410 million and led by Gilbane Building Company, had brought in a crawler crane operated by Sentry Crane and Rigging LLC to handle heavy concrete pours. That morning, the National Weather Service had issued a warning. Winds along the Brevard County coast were expected to reach 50 miles per hour. Despite the advisory, work pressed on. By midday, sustained winds were clocked at nearly 30 miles per hour, with gusts well above the safe limit for crane operation. Witnesses later described the crane's boom swaying as workers hurried to complete the lift. Then, without warning, the boom collapsed, crashing down onto the site. 2 workers lost their lives in the chaos that followed. Their names were withheld from news reports at the request of their families, but memorials and union statements spoke to the loss felt across the community. The collapse was not simply a matter of bad luck or unpredictable weather. Local news investigations revealed that Brevard County, responsible for overseeing construction safety, had only 2 certified crane inspectors on staff in June 2025. With hundreds of active sites spread across the county, each inspector was stretched thin, sometimes responsible for more than 60 projects at once. County records confirmed that neither inspector had visited the Cape Canaveral site in the 2 days before the tragedy. In the aftermath, OSHA and other outlets questioned whether the drive to keep projects on schedule had eclipsed basic safety. OSHA's preliminary findings pointed to a failure to suspend crane operations despite official wind advisories. The incident at Cape Canaveral, coming just weeks before the Merritt Island collapse, exposed a deeper vulnerability. When oversight is thin and warnings go unheeded, the risks extend far beyond any single household. By August 2025, the United States had recorded 11 major crane collapses, with 6 deaths and dozens of injuries. Federal data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics paints a stark picture. On average, between 42 and 44 Americans die each year in crane-related incidents. From 2011 through 2017, there were 297 fatalities nationwide, a figure that does not include the mounting toll of the past 2 years. Industry analysis of 249 significant crane accidents links these events to 838 separate OSHA violations, resulting in 133 injuries and 133 deaths. Florida stands out as a national hotspot. Between 2011 and 2017, the state recorded 27 crane-related deaths, second only to Texas, which reported 42. In 2025 alone, Florida has been at the center of 2 of the year's most widely reported collapses: the Merritt Island residential disaster and the Cape Canaveral Hospital tragedy. The pattern is not unique to one region. In April 2024, a crane fell onto vehicles in Tampa, killing 1 and injuring 3. That same spring, 2 photojournalists died in Mexico City when an uninspected crane collapsed during a music festival. The construction industry has seen nearly 2 major crane accidents per month in 2025, a pace that safety experts call unprecedented. OSHA's preliminary findings and emergency hearings have drawn attention to a common thread: failures in site assessment, inadequate crew training, and overlooked regulatory steps. Each number in these reports represents a workplace changed forever, a family left to pick up the pieces. As the year draws on, the statistics are no longer abstract. They are evidence of a crisis that demands urgent attention, not just from regulators and contractors, but from every community where cranes rise above the skyline. A home can be rebuilt, but peace of mind is harder to restore. For Jim and Amanda Crane, months have passed in temporary housing, while insurance companies debate who is responsible for more than $400,000 in damages. Their story is a warning, but it is also a guide for others, especially seniors, about how to protect themselves before the first piece of heavy equipment arrives on their street. The American Society of Civil Engineers now recommends that every residential crane operation require a ground-penetrating radar survey. This is not just for large construction sites. It includes utility work and even small residential lifts. If you see a crane or heavy equipment near your home, ask to see written proof of a recent 811 call and a GPR scan. These are your rights under Florida law. The Florida 811 system can be reached by dialing 811 or visiting florida811.com. If a contractor cannot provide documentation, you have the right to contact local permitting offices or code enforcement. For Brevard County, the main number is 321-63-32072. Document everything. Take photos of equipment, workers, and any visible markings or lack thereof. Ask for the contractor's insurance information and keep a record of every conversation. If you notice unsafe practices, call OSHA at 1-800-32-16742. These steps are not just bureaucratic. They can mean the difference between a close call and a catastrophe. For those already affected, like the cranes, persistence is essential. Insurance disputes over contractor negligence are common, especially when multiple companies are involved. Keep copies of news coverage, incident reports, and all correspondence. If compensation is delayed, contact the Florida Department of Financial Services Consumer Helpline at 1-877-693-5236. As OSHA prepares to release final reports and penalties, expected to exceed $500,000 per incident, pressure is mounting for real accountability. But lasting change will depend on everyday vigilance. The checklist is simple. Demand proof of safety steps, document everything, and don't hesitate to speak up. The crane's ordeal is a reminder that prevention starts at the curb, long before disaster strikes. In 2025, 11 major crane collapses across the United States claimed 6 lives and destroyed homes like that of Jim and Amanda Crane in Merritt Island. News footage and official records show that, in this case, warnings were ignored, required utility scans were skipped, and basic safety rules went unenforced. The same year, 2 workers died in a nearby Cape Canaveral crane accident, highlighting critical gaps in inspection and oversight. Despite clear evidence of preventable errors, final OSHA reports and insurance settlements remain unresolved, leaving families displaced and communities demanding answers. National data confirms that Florida continues to face one of the highest rates of crane-related deaths in the country. As 2025 draws to a close, the facts are clear. Regulatory lapses, cost pressures, and ignored warnings have led to tragedy. The story of the Crane family stands as documented proof that even the most improbable disasters can happen, unless safety protocols and oversight are enforced before another name is added to the statistics.